We are live, and we are here today to talk about something that I saw an actress that I was a fan of. I can't say I've seen a ton of her work necessarily, but she was in a movie with Harrison Ford, and I honestly can't remember the name of the movie right now. It's like slipping my mind. But Anne Heche, she unfortunately was just recently in an accident, and I saw this photo of her, and she was in her car. It's like 9 in the morning or something like that, and you can see there's a bottle of vodka right there. Right. And I think later on in that day, she was driving 90 miles per hour, got in a horrific accident. And I haven't seen the most recent update on whether or not she is kind of pulled out of it, but I know it was kind of touch and go for a moment. Anyways, it just made me sad, right, to see. And I know that her story, and I don't fully know the whole story, right? So just let me acknowledge that. But it's not an atypical story. This Hollywood sense of people who go on these meteoric rises that seem to have everything, right? They're on top of the world, but then everything kind of falls apart. And I believe, it certainly has been my experience, and I've gotten the chance to get to know, I live out here in Southern California. I've gotten the privilege to meet some really amazing people that have experienced tremendous fame and celebrity status. Some people who seem deeply secure in who they are, have a strong sense of identity. And unfortunately, I've met some people who just seem profoundly insecure and struggle mightily, right? And I've gotten a chance to work with quite a few as well. And there seems to be a very similar pattern in kind of what happens, and identity being kind of the key piece in the struggle on the self-destructive behaviors. So, but Mr. David Osk, how are you doing? And what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me here. It's a funny thing to like name a name, right? And to pick on somebody whose story that we don't quite know. And at the same time, you're right. The theme in so many cases, whether it's celebrity or people who are just really high achievers, right? They're wanting to make global waves and so on. Some of them do it quite swimmingly, right? Some of them, their ability to produce and kind of stay the course and stay to their own constitution, that kind of stuff is pretty amazing. But it's actually kind of rare too. There's so many people get to that space and realize, boy, this is really meaningless to me now. And they have no idea why. So I'll just kind of tee it up and maybe share a personal story, with myself, and again, with, Anne Heche, I'm not sure you pronounce her name, but I mean, what a sad experience there. Right? I mean, there's somebody who is, I don't know what percentage, but a high percentage of Americans know her name and people she's associated with. And to get to that point where you're, 9 a.m. and plastered drunk and, that kind of thing, that's a tough place to be for anybody.
Yeah.
My story, and I've realized this even lately at 48 years old, is growing up, we're kind of indoctrinated in the American dream to become someone of note. Yeah. Meaning we're going to be recognized. So this idea of celebrity and notoriety and that kind of stuff is drilled into our psyche from an early age. We're marketed to. I mean, well, since we're from when we're infants, and then hundreds, maybe thousands of times on any given day, that somehow if you're not achieving XYZ status, that you're somehow less than. So I think that with probably noble intent, most parents are like, hey, we live in the greatest country in the world. You better get out there and make something of yourself, get after it. And if you happen to have a dream of some sort that might lean toward a possible, celebrity-ish, experience, right? Whether it's, think of athletes or musicians or, actors and things like that. Well, if you have an ability, well, people would naturally even then say, hey, you've got this, go for it, go big, that kind of thing.
Well, you live that, right? I mean, you're out there in Nashville. You are a phenomenal singer, right? Have you had the chance to sing with some pretty amazing, talented artists, right? And I know you're right there with them. And you've rubbed elbows with, huge names in the world of singing and entertainment. What's been your experience in both the pursuit of success in that field and having, interacted with people who are in that arena?
Yeah. So that's, so my story is exactly kind of that paradigm where I just was really, I'll just use the phrase, kind of desperate to become a success, and at the very least, become somebody, at the very least, not be a nobody, that kind of thing. Well, what does that say, right? That means that I'm looking out there for other people to satisfy, something internally in me. Not that we can't enjoy people clapping and, hey, great job, David, that kind of thing. We live in community and those are appropriate things. But I think for the longest time, my identity, right? My sense of authenticity was sorely lacking. So therefore I was looking for the big answers to my questions from an external source.
Yeah.
And
it's like you're starting from a place of deficit, right? There's a sense of, as using the word, right? The sense of nobody, and you're looking to find that you are somebody.
Pick me, that kind of thing. And as opposed to what I realize now, being a man who understands exactly who I am and the impact that I want to have, to the point where I really feel like I'm on mission, right? And I am. I don't, my mission statement, right? Whether word, song, or action, I will inspire people to become the most fulfilled and finest versions of themselves. I know exactly the David Osk impact that I want to have, whether I'm on stage, or with my family, or with you, or anybody else. But that's taken a bit of work as well.
You've sung on a couple of pretty big stages, some of which I know you can't even say because you have to sign NDAs, right, to sing there. And I know that you've gone and there's a sense of that mission that you bring to it. How has that changed how you define success, right? And how you kind of approach performing on these big stages in front of, really significant people?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think I've always had a really a clear understanding that I want to have a noble, delightful impact on people's emotions. Like I want them. I remember even early on in my high school career thinking that I don't want to, go to some city, some night and do a concert. I want people to say when they hear David Osk and experience me, it was an evening. It was not just a concert. I want them to remember how I made them feel, right? And that's who I am, and I've been that way my entire life. More recently, right, and really with your help, I've been assigning meaning to that, and understanding, my core values and things like that. But at the same time, boy, there was a lot of years where I was looking to that the musical world to be an income stream and that kind of thing, and feeling like a failure because I wasn't quite finding my niche and that kind of thing. And so it was some years of a pretty hard rub there.
Yeah. And by the way, I see, Russ Hedge here is commenting, and I'm going to be on his live stream a little bit later. So if anyone's looking to talk about growth mindset, we'll be covering that later. It's interesting. We used to go to Morton's up in LA. I had a friend that was a waitress there. Yeah. And not every once in a while, every time I was there, you'd see celebrities. And I saw Vince Vaughn at one point, and he came walking through, and I was a huge Vince Vaughn. It was like right in his heyday, right, when he was doing Wedding Crashers and those movies. And he walked by our table, and my friend's like, say hi to him. And I felt like this incredible nervousness, like that. I put him on a pedestal. Sure. And so there's a sense that a lot of times these celebrities they get put in positions that, quite frankly, they don't always feel like they deserve. And so it feels very awkward for them. Yeah. And I've worked with a number of celebrities who their story is, I could probably think of 5 off the top of my head right now, is that they felt very awkward and insecure going through school. They often were, the traditional sports wasn't really their thing. Sure. They kind of found theater, as a byproduct of trying to find their way. They were a little bit of miscast, kind of outcast at school. And so, and as they found something they were good at, right, they kind of got a sense of identity from there. But there was this perpetual yearning, right? This kind of sense that I think you were talking about, looking outside themselves, believing that if I could just be successful enough, right, when I get to this level and I get this fame and this celebrity status, that it would fill this hole that was inside of them. Yeah. And unfortunately, what they found is even as they reached the top of their fields and industry, right? And I know in athletes, it's the same way, right? Nothing doesn't matter how much success that they experience. It can't fill the hole. It has to be an inside job. Right. Yeah. There has to be a sense of learning how to develop self-acceptance, coming to terms with, right, your identity. your reputation is kind of the outward sense of how people know you and experience you.
Yeah.
Right. Your identity is like the truth of who you are. It's what you believe about yourself. It's that inner relationship. And when you square that away, it's amazing how all of a sudden it clarifies everything on the external. But if you haven't done that, it's like you're at war with yourself. And so these individuals are experiencing success after success, and they're getting all these this money and, this external environment's pulling on them. It's almost like traditional rules don't apply to them. And yet they still feel like that deeply insecure kind of empty, kid, that's pursuing, someone to be proud or that kind of level of acceptance. And when it doesn't come, unfortunately, they often look to drugs or alcohol to self-medicate, that war within. And you see this really self-destructive kind of path and pattern that's really sad to see, right? You see people who seem to have it all, and yet it's like they're so hell-bent on just destroying their lives.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I, as you were talking there, I was just thinking about this. One of the first times I heard you actually describe, authenticity and so on. In the past, I would have kind of rolled my eyes and been a bit dismissive, like, get out there and make something of yourself. You need to make who you are. And what I think is fascinating is those of us who have children really understand acutely that our kids come out of the gate very hardwired. So the day that I kind of had this bubble popped in my mind with regards to the fact that I didn't choose my eye color, my taste buds, and even my personality. You know what I mean? We can choose a lot of things. I get it. But I have hardwired, authored things in me, right? So I have a biblical worldview that I see, my life as a created being, right? And what's fascinating is now that I've identified, right, identity, those things that have been authored in me that are the most powerful, precious, courageous things that I can name with the English language. It's amazing how on most days I feel so much more equipped, to make decisions, and, my yes being a yes and my no being a no, and, so much more clarity and so on. And again, I want to say too, why we sure don't want to paint some utopia here, right? This is, we are a mixed, mixed bag of fickle human contradictions, right? I mean, there's a lot going on in the human mind, body, psyche, history, all that kind of stuff. But with that said, right, if you've not done the inner size, I love how you say that, the inner size versus exercise. If you've not done the inner size to identify those things, the hierarchy of those things that are most, that describe you at the highest level, well, good luck in making decisions that seem like that sweater, right? Like that glove, that seem like you're exhaling. If you don't do that, you're constantly going to be looking outside yourself for all the big answers. Yeah. And granted, I just want to say it this way, right? I didn't understand all this stuff until I met you. So part of finding those answers is finding, someone to help you, ask better questions of yourself, that kind of thing.
Well, certainly appreciate that. And it's amazing to watch that sense of mission and drive that I see you living out. We use the term true north, and I really didn't know the difference between true north and magnetic north until I started using that term and then looked it up. But it only reinforced that it's exactly the right terminology, right? Because true north is it's a location, right? It remains the same no matter what. Whereas magnetic north is constantly reacting to the environment, right? The electromagnetic field, and it's changing ever so slightly. Now, again, I know if you're using a compass, it's reliable. But, when you think about like what's grounding a lot of people as their success starts to take off at meteoric heights, do they have a clear sense of what that higher good in them is, right? That sense of this is what really matters. This is what's important. How do I prioritize as I'm having more and more options and choices that are difficult, right? Where immediate gratification and the most incredible experiences are putting before you. What keeps you grounded into what really matters? What makes you feel happy and joyful? What makes those right choices, right? We know autonomy is self-governed choice with moral agency. And it requires both ends of that to have autonomy. Autonomy being the best predictor of happiness, right? Everybody wants freedom, but they pursue freedom often is, I want to do whatever I want to do, right? Whether that's impulsive, it's immediate gratification. I promise you that is not a pathway to happiness. In fact, it has led to more self-destruction than just about anything that I've ever seen. But when autonomy is driven by a sense of, I know what that higher good is, and I'm able to get through the emotions of the moment, I'm able to delay gratification, and I'm able to consistently choose the best and right path for me, your capacity for freedom and happiness is nearly unlimited. And I think that's what's difficult. If you think about the Stanford prison experiment, do you remember the Stanford prison experiment?
Yeah.
Right. So you have these college students at Stanford who, they made sure to evaluate that they weren't psychopaths. These were quote unquote like good students, good kids, but they put them in an environment that would challenge them to make decisions that were, morally compromised, evil. And so they wanted to see, would these good kids make bad, evil choices? And they found that it was supposed to be a 2-week study, right? Assigned some kids randomly as prisoners or prison guards. And within 4 days, things had gotten so completely out of hand, right? The prison guards were using really abusive tactics. They were yelling and really, and the prisoners, their psychological condition had completely deteriorated. And so, in the Zimbardo, the guy who's running the study, he actually himself couldn't see beyond the own, he justified the study because it was for the good of science. It took his girlfriend coming in saying, you need to pull the plug on this. This has gotten completely out of hand, or I'm going to break up with you. And so he did. And he realized, right, this was a volunteer study. At any point, these students could have said, you know what, I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm out of here. I think only a handful of them did. And there were students who had a clearly defined sense of self, grounded in their values. So when they were pushed by their environment to say, am I going to do this, or am I going to stand up for what's right? They had predetermined what right was. So they were able to make that choice and not give in. He said, if you haven't clearly defined who you are, and it's not rooted and grounded in that strong sense of values, if you think your environment is not pushing you in directions, right, that are maybe untrue to who you are, then you're sorely mistaken. So how does that exist for celebrities?
Oh man, can you imagine the pressure that is on, on a celebrity? I remember, being with a celebrity here in town backstage, and they had, 20 people talking to them while I'm standing there just asking questions and doing this, and 10 of those people were probably on their payroll. And it's so to have people who have maybe an ulterior motive on some level, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's so messy. And then you walk out on stage and you've got 10,000 people screaming, to be able to handle something like that on a remotely good level would be, just a miracle.
Yeah.
And I want to make a comment about, you said that, maybe you can kind of fill in the gaps here. So autonomy is agency with a moral equivalent there. Is that
self-governed choice, right? So I'm freely choosing it. It's my choice. I own it, right? I'm not feeling obligated. I'm not being pressured. With moral agencies, there's a sense that it's consistent with my sense of what is right and wrong, of my values.
So with regards to the Stanford prison experiment, right? The word predetermined then, right, jumps out, massively here.
Yeah.
So whether it's a case that's, really acute like that, or what if it's those acute decisions that you make every single day that you want to stop making, right?
Yeah.
On what basis are you establishing yourself to draw a line in the sand, even against those minor decisions that you don't want to keep doing? We're making choices all day long, and if you've not predetermined what is most valuable to you, and really valuable, well, guess what? Life gets a little hard, you get tired, you get a little anxious, you get a little mad, whatever it is, and we start, instead of having that sense of autonomy and agency, moral agency, to speak into something that's less than, we just kind of roll with it because we've not clearly defined what is really important to us. And even after, it's funny because it takes some time after a couple of years ago of going through your course and now having a really clear vocabulary. It's amazing how I recognize now that I'm course correcting all day long. But now it's not to some arbitrary pie in the sky what, it's to a who. It's me, right? It's what I've absolutely chosen that I value the most in this world, and to try, right? We're human, make decisions based on that framework. And man, when I laser in on those things and make decisions on that, what happens? My confidence rises, my joy rises, my peace rises and a whole lot of other stuff disappears. And so I good luck if you've not done that, right? And that's what I felt for years.
We know at this point, right, that happiness, like there's an actual ratio, and this is proven to be consistent and true, whether we're looking at, couples that are happiest and thrive, whether we're looking at individual well-being, right, and someone that's thriving and consistently happy, or whether this is in a business environment, a culture, right, that promotes people doing their best work and thriving. And it seems to be roughly 5-1, right? So that's 5 of these positive moments to every time there's a negative. So in personal well-being, that exists for every moment that I feel on purpose, I feel inspired, I feel joyful, I feel connected, right? Yeah. There's a negative moment. It's almost like a bank account, right? Here's a deposit into my happiness, and here's a withdrawal, a moment that I'm in self-judgment, right? I feel rejected. The problem is that, our emotions are strong. So in this negative moment where all of a sudden I feel insecure, do I allow the emotion of that and all the thoughts that come with it, and I'm flooded with all these, kind of neurochemicals? Am I able to see my way out of that to recalibrate, course correct to true north? Yeah. Or does it set a snowball in action where all of a sudden I spend the next hour just beating myself up with a club over and over again? That leads to maybe a poor choice where I avoid dealing with something that I should, or whatever it is. Yeah. And all of a sudden I've taken out 25 withdrawals and I have to spend all this time, energy, and effort trying to get back on track. Right. And one of the things that we've heard about, over and over in this course is from people is I spend less time needing to correct, right? Yeah. Having to repair bad decisions that I've made. And I spend more time enjoying, right? Saying yes to the right things, prioritizing the right stuff, right? Having my guiding principles help me to recalibrate and course correct into what is most joyful and most true to who I am.
And I think it's funny when you said an hour, a snowball's for an hour. How about a month or 10
I don't need to laugh. Yeah.
Or 10 years, it's like, wait a second. I look back and think, man, I wasted, so many years really with a train of thought because I was just constantly looking, outside of myself for, somebody else's approval or applause or something like that. And again, not that we can't do great things and have people, pat us on the back and those things feel great. I mean, we're made to be loved and to love, but at the same time, boy, my decision-making ability has gotten so much better, and because I've just found bedrock inside of me and the things that I value the most.
And you think about this through that lens of the celebrity, right? And I think you point out such a great thing that they sometimes surround themselves with yes people, right? People who often have ulterior motives that, maybe their quality of life is dependent upon, telling the celebrity how amazing they are and never giving honest critiques and feedback. Yeah. But that is so dangerous, right? And so these people get a distorted sense. They never get a chance to really hear, hey, you're wrong, right? You need someone to speak truth into you, someone to help you, see, kind of act as like buffers or guardrails that help you to course correct. And so that can be and then, on top of that, they often are given special, leverage or privileges in the sense of they don't experience the same consequences as we always do.
Sure.
I had a grandfather who was very successful, right? Wasn't an actor or a celebrity in, the sense of media, but certainly locally, right? He was extremely well known. And the coolest thing for me was, as I got a chance to experience him, how he was in a public persona and who he was in private, spending, 30 years of really being very close to him, let's call him my best friend at points. And he was so consistent. Right. I never saw that here he was, putting on an act and on a stage. And then at home, I was like, well, who's this? It was the same exact person over and over again. Right. The way he loved on people, the way that he made other people feel like they were the center of, the time. He wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Sure. He made many mistakes. There was things that he did that he had to apologize for, all that. He's human. But that was really powerful, as opposed to having people that I've met that I put on that pedestal, and then you get to know them, in private, and it's like, man, you are not at all who I thought you were. Yeah. And I think, that's where you see this compartmentalization or the sense of needing to put on the face, the act, right? And actors get good at doing method acting and taking on a persona. And I think sometimes in the process, they lose sight of who the real, true core essence of who they are. What's that changeless core, that true north, that remains the same, right? That helps them to find their pathway forward, no matter what's going on in their external environment.
Yeah. And then once again, that word predetermining is just everything, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll wrap it up on this. I think I've referenced, I don't know if I've shared it on any of these live streams, but there was a really interesting book. I think it was called Black Box Thinking or something like that, but it was about pilots. And so commercial jets, I think for the most part, they fly on instruments most of the time, right? If they're not, it's usually because things have, gone haywire and they're trying to avoid catastrophe. And so what they found is that when that does happen, right, the instruments go down and then the pilot needs to take over, is they're flooded with adrenaline. And so their mind gets, with all the uncertainty, it gets tunnel vision. And oftentimes they will fixate on a solution that's not the actual solution, but they can't see that the actual solution's just like right outside their view because they get such tunnel vision. And they can't really see through the neurochemicals, right, that are flooding their brain. And so one of the things that they've done to try and combat that is they have them go through a checklist before they take off. If this happens, then we'll do this, right? And you got the pilot and the co-pilot, and they both are checking each other and helping each other. So they've predetermined. They have these guiding principles that help them to pre-commit to how they do. And they found that since they've done that, it has dramatically cut back on catastrophic, accidents. Now, what if we do that in our own life? Right? I mean, that's one of the things that we do. It's one of the most powerful things I've ever done. My guiding principles happen to come in the form of questions.
Sure.
One of the most powerful questions that's helped save me from doing a lot of stupid stuff in my marriage and my business is this the only option? Because in the moment when I'm starting to feel hurt, right, I'm feeling insecure, my emotions telling me, well, this is the right thing to do, right? This is the give my wife the silent treatment, right? Run and avoid dealing with this. But is this the only option? Helps me to recalibrate, and I've written out who I want to be, helps me to course correct to that. So
yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think when you decide, that it's really a choice. We're choosing all day long, but when you've predetermined and you've decided with a radical clarity, this is who I am. These are the things that I identify with. So when I'm course correcting, I'm not course correcting to some pie in the sky should, right? I'm course correcting to what I've already predetermined is valuable to me, my core values.
Having said that, I know we put Ann Hish, we didn't put her on blast, right? But obviously our prayers go out to her. And we understand this is not easy. Like this stuff, trying to really find secure identity, trying to deal with all the messages that we get bombarded with along the way and the times that we fail and the insecurities and all that, it's tough, right? It's really challenging trying to deal with emotions and find the right course of action. So that's why we think it's important to have a guide. If it's not us, we'd love to help direct to somewhere else or find good resources. One of the best ways to deal with uncertainty is finding really good information and finding great resources that help you to feel like there's a path, there's hope. You take uncertainty and turn it into clarity and certainty, and it's a great antidote to that. So, David Osk, and you are the man.
Thanks,
I appreciate you.